The late afternoon sun cast golden streaks across the private stretch of Malibu coastline, turning the waves into shimmering ribbons of light. Ethan Caldwell stood at the edge of his sprawling beachfront estate, the rhythmic crash of the tide the only sound cutting through the eerie silence. In his hand, a half-empty glass of bourbon reflected the fading sun, the amber liquid sloshing against the crystal. He should have felt victorious. His company, Caldwell Innovations, had just secured a billion-dollar merger, one that would solidify his dominance in the world of artificial intelligence. The business magazines would hail him as a visionary. Investors would celebrate. But none of it mattered. Not really. Ethan loosened his tie, exhaling a slow breath as he watched a father and his two kids playing on the public section of the beach just beyond his property line. The father lifted his youngest into the air, her laughter carrying on the wind. The older boy tackled his dad into the sand, both collapsing into a heap of joy. Ethan looked away. He had no time for such distractions. A sharp chime broke his reverie. He turned, stepping into his sleek, glass-walled mansion, the scent of polished wood and ocean breeze mingling in the air. His assistant's name flashed on his phone screen. "Jessica," he answered, setting his drink down on the kitchen counter. "Sir, the board is expecting you in the New York office tomorrow. They want a strategy meeting regarding the merger's press release." Ethan rubbed his temple. "Push it to Friday." A pause. "The board won't like that." "They never do." Jessica hesitated. "Sir, if I may, you haven't been to headquarters in almost a month. People are talking." "Let them." Silence stretched between them before Jessica finally said, "Understood. I'll reschedule." Ethan ended the call and glanced back toward the window. The father and his kids were packing up, shaking sand from towels and laughing as they walked toward the parking lot. His jaw clenched. Why does it bother me? He had always been pragmatic. Family and relationships complicated things. He'd made his choice 12 years ago when he walked away from everything that wasn't his career, including the one woman who had ever mattered. Rachel. Shaking off the thought, he strode toward his office. The space was a temple to efficiency: dark wood, steel accents, floor-to-ceiling monitors displaying stock trends, engineering prototypes, and the latest AI models his company was developing. This was his empire. This was what he had built from nothing. Yet, for all the accolades, the wealth, and the influence, something gnawed at him. A hollowness he couldn't define. He pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk, his fingers brushing over a worn leather notebook. Rachel's notebook. 12 years. He had never read it, never even opened it since the day she left it behind. He told himself it was because he didn't need to. The past was the past. And yet, tonight, with the sounds of the ocean lapping against the shore and the echo of children's laughter still in his ears, he found himself flipping open the cover. Rachel's handwriting was as precise as he remembered, each page filled with notes on machine learning, AI ethics, and sketches of algorithms they had once built together back at MIT. But in between the equations and code snippets were pieces of her life, thoughts she had never shared with him. I wonder if Ethan ever thinks about the people he leaves behind. His grip tightened on the pages. A memory surfaced. Boston, 12 years ago. A dorm room filled with coffee cups, tangled wires, and midnight conversations about the future. Rachel sitting cross-legged on the floor, typing furiously as she argued with him about the philosophical implications of AI. "You want to change the world," she had said. "But at what cost, Ethan? What's the point of innovation if there's no one to share it with?" He had laughed then, dismissing her concern. "You'll see. One day we'll have everything." But Rachel had shaken her head, her gaze steady. "I don't want everything, Ethan. I just want something real." He had left Boston 2 months later, never looking back. Now, standing in the sterile perfection of his office, Rachel's words felt like a knife to his ribs. The weight of silence pressed in, and for the first time in years, Ethan wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had been chasing the wrong kind of success all along. Outside, the beach was empty now, save for the rolling waves and the fading imprint of small footprints in the sand. The cold Boston air bit through the thin windows of the cramped 2-bedroom apartment above a small family-run diner. The apartment wasn't much, but for Liam and Noah Carter, it was home. Tonight, however, home felt unbearably small. The twins huddled around their mother's aging laptop, the screen flickering slightly as they scrolled through page after page of search results. Their mother, Rachel Carter, was asleep in the next room, her labored breathing punctuating the silence. The pneumonia had hit her hard, and despite the antibiotics, her condition wasn't improving. The bills were mounting, and they both knew the truth. The money was running out. "We have to do something," Noah murmured, his hazel eyes scanning the web page in front of him. His fingers hovered over the touchpad, scrolling through the latest news article about Ethan Caldwell, tech mogul, billionaire, and the man their mother never spoke about. Liam, the more reserved of the two, sighed and leaned back in his chair. "We don't even know if he'd care." Noah's jaw clenched. "He's our father, Liam. He deserves to know we exist. And Mom needs help." A silence settled between them. Their mother had never once spoken Ethan Caldwell's name, but she hadn't needed to. Over the years, they had put the pieces together. Old college photos, Rachel's carefully stored keepsakes, and an unmistakable resemblance they shared with the man they had only ever seen on magazine covers. Liam exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Let's say we find him. What makes you think he's going to suddenly care?" Noah's fingers tightened on the laptop. "Because we exist, and because—" He hesitated, then turned the laptop around to show Liam. "Because I did this." Liam frowned and leaned forward. The screen displayed a custom-built facial recognition algorithm running side-by-side comparisons of Ethan Caldwell's photos with their own. The match percentage flashed in bold numbers, 99.4%. "You built this?" Liam asked, impressed despite himself. "Yeah," Noah admitted. "I used some open-source AI frameworks and trained it using facial features and genetic probability markers." Liam let out a low whistle. "Mom would kill you if she knew you hacked public databases for this." Noah shot him a look. "Mom won't find out. Besides, this just proves what we already knew. Ethan Caldwell is our father." Liam stared at the screen, his mind racing. Their mother had done everything to give them a good life, despite the struggles. She had worked multiple jobs, ensured they had access to books and computers, and taught them coding from a young age. But she had also carried the weight of something unspoken, something she never wanted to share. "What if he turns us away?" Liam asked quietly. Noah squared his shoulders. "Then at least we tried." The brothers exchanged a look, one of shared determination. They had spent their entire lives wondering about the man whose DNA they carried. Now, with their mother sick and their options running out, it was time to get answers. Noah clicked on another tab, pulling up flight details. "I checked flights. We have just enough from our savings to get to L.A." Liam's eyebrows shot up. "You want to fly across the country and just, what, show up at his office?" Noah shook his head. "Number, that wouldn't work. He's surrounded by security, executives, and assistants who'd never let us near him." Liam frowned. "Then how?" A slow smile spread across Noah's face as he pulled up another tab. It was a satellite image of a private beachfront estate in Malibu, California. "He spends Sundays alone at his private beach," Noah explained. "No meetings, no security, just him. We wait for the right moment, and we talk to him face to face. Liam hesitated. Mom's going to kill us. Mom doesn't have to know yet, Noah countered. We leave a note for Aunt Linda, tell her we'll be back soon. We just need to make him listen. Liam tapped his fingers against his knee, thinking. It was reckless. It was insane. But it was also the only chance they had. Okay, he said finally. Let's do it. The next morning, Rachel Carter stirred in bed, her body heavy with exhaustion. Even in sleep, her dreams were troubled, filled with images of a past she had long tried to forget. A soft creak of the apartment door caught her attention. Frowning, she struggled to sit up, her heart pounding. "Noah? Liam?" she called, her voice hoarse. No answer. Then she saw it, a neatly folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. Her stomach twisted with unease as she reached for it. "Mom, we need to do something, and we don't have time to wait. We're going to find him. Please don't be mad. We'll be safe. We just need to know. We love you. Liam and Noah." Rachel's breath caught. She gripped the paper, her hands trembling. A wave of dizziness swept over her, but she forced herself to remain steady. Her boys, her brilliant, stubborn, foolish boys. She reached for her phone with shaking hands and dialed. "Linda," she said the moment her sister picked up. "They're gone." A sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" Rachel swallowed hard. "They went to find him. They went to find Ethan." Silence. Then Linda's voice, quiet but urgent. "Rachel, what do you want to do?" Rachel closed her eyes. There was only one thing she could do. "I need to stop them before it's too late." Liam and Noah Carter sat side by side on the plane, their fingers gripping the armrests as the aircraft lifted off the ground. The roar of the engines drowned out everything else, but inside their minds, the weight of what they were doing pressed down hard. Noah turned to his brother, his hazel eyes reflecting a mix of determination and nervous energy. "There's no turning back now." Liam let out a breath, glancing out the window at the shrinking city below. Boston was their home. It had been their entire world, but now everything was about to change. "Yeah," he murmured. "I just hope we're ready." They had spent the last night poring over their plan, memorizing every detail of Ethan Caldwell's schedule, his property layout, even the best time to approach him. But none of that changed the reality. Ethan was a billionaire, a man surrounded by power, security, and expectations. They were just two kids with a mission and barely enough money for a return ticket. "Mom's going to lose it," Liam added after a long silence. Noah sighed. "I know. But we had to do this. For her. For us." Liam knew he was right. But that didn't make it easier. He tapped his fingers on the seat rest, a habit he had picked up from their mother when she was lost in thought. He had seen her do it countless times as she stared at bills, making calculations in her head, always finding a way to make things work no matter how impossible it seemed. For once, it was their turn to find a way. After nearly 6 hours in the air, the plane touched down at Los Angeles International Airport. The twins stepped off into the warm California sun, a stark contrast to the biting cold they had left behind in Boston. Liam adjusted his backpack straps. Now what? Noah pulled out his phone, checking the screenshots he had saved of Ethan's schedule and social media activity. "We take the bus to Malibu. His beach house is a private property, but there's a public section nearby. He spends Sunday afternoons there alone." Liam glanced around at the bustling airport, his stomach twisting with uncertainty. "And what if he doesn't want to see us?" Noah's jaw tightened. "Then we make him listen." The bus ride was long, winding through the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles before hugging the coastline of the Pacific Ocean. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. palm trees, cliffs, the endless stretch of blue water. Even Liam, who had been skeptical of this entire plan, couldn't help but be mesmerized by the sight of the waves crashing against the shore. "We're not in Boston anymore," he muttered, watching surfers carve through the water with effortless ease. Noah smirked. No kidding. By the time they arrived in Malibu, the afternoon sun had begun its descent, casting a golden glow over the sand. The public beach was alive with families, couples and kids playing in the waves, but their focus was elsewhere. They spotted the sleek, modern beach house perched atop a small hill, overlooking the ocean. A stretch of pristine, untouched sand separated it from the public beach, the boundary marked by a line of jagged rocks and a discreetly placed private property sign. "There," Noah whispered. Liam swallowed hard. It felt different now that they were actually here. Surreal, like stepping into a scene from a movie. Except this wasn't fiction. This was their life. "How do we get close without getting thrown out?" Liam asked. Noah had already thought about that. "We stay near the waterline. It's technically still public property. If he's out there, he'll see us." They walked carefully along the shore, their sneakers sinking slightly into the damp sand. It wasn't long before they spotted him. Ethan Caldwell sat alone in a lounge chair, his laptop balanced on his lap, the screen glowing faintly against the dimming sunlight. He was dressed casually, linen shirt, rolled-up sleeves, expensive sunglasses shielding his eyes. But even from a distance, his presence was commanding. This was a man used to power, used to being in control. Liam felt a lump form in his throat. "That's him." Noah nodded, already stepping forward. "Come on." Liam hesitated for only a second before following. As they approached, their shadows stretched across the sand, reaching Ethan before they did. He glanced up, and for a moment nothing happened. Then he removed his sunglasses, his sharp gaze locking onto them with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something unreadable. "Mr. Caldwell?" Noah's voice was steady, though Liam could hear the nervous edge beneath it. Ethan straightened in his chair, setting his laptop aside. "Who are you?" Liam took a deep breath. "We're Liam and Noah Carter." There was no flicker of recognition in Ethan's eyes, but something in his posture changed, subtle, but there. "Okay?" Noah reached into his backpack, pulling out a worn envelope. "We think you knew our mother, Rachel Carter." Ethan's expression didn't change, but the air around them seemed to shift. He took the envelope from Noah's hand, opening it carefully. Inside were old photos. Rachel in college, laughing on the MIT campus, a younger Ethan standing beside her. Pictures of their mother, happy and vibrant. Ethan stared at the images, silent. Then his eyes lifted to the two boys in front of him, really looking at them this time. The same sharp features, the same strong jawline. And then there was the other thing, the thing he couldn't ignore. They had his eyes. Liam saw it the moment realization hit Ethan. His grip on the photos tightened slightly. A flicker of something, shock, maybe even fear, crossed his face before he masked it with carefully controlled neutrality. "Rachel," Ethan finally said, his voice low. "Where is she?" Noah's shoulders squared. "She's in the hospital. Pneumonia. She's been working herself into the ground for years, and now we're out of options." Ethan's brow furrowed, his focus now razor-sharp. "Why didn't she—" He cut himself off, shaking his head. 12 years. She never told me." "No," Liam said, his voice quiet. "She didn't." Ethan looked at the photos again, then back at them. The weight of 12 years of absence was suddenly unbearable, pressing against his chest. Finally he exhaled. "Come inside." Noah and Liam exchanged a glance before stepping forward, following the man who, until today, had only been a name, a face on a magazine cover, their father. Ethan Caldwell led the boys into his sleek, glass-walled beach house, his mind spinning as he processed what had just happened. 12 years. 12 years, and Rachel had never once told him he had sons. And now, here they were, standing in his home, looking at him like he was supposed to have answers. He wasn't sure if he had any. Liam and Noah stood awkwardly in the spacious living room, their gazes darting around the modern space. It was nothing like their small Boston apartment. The vaulted ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, and expensive furniture made it look more like something out of a movie than a home. But what struck them most was the emptiness of it. It was pristine, immaculate, but it didn't feel lived in. "This is where you live?" Noah asked, his voice filled with something between curiosity and skepticism. "Yes," Ethan said, running a hand through his hair. "I split my time between here and my place in San Francisco." Liam folded his arms. "Must be nice." Ethan caught the edge in his voice and exhaled, trying to figure out how to navigate this situation. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, outmaneuvered corporate sharks, and built an empire from the ground up. But this? Facing two boys who were his sons but whom he had never known. He was completely out of his depth. "Sit," he finally said, gesturing to the oversized sectional couch. "I think we all have a lot of questions." The boys hesitated before sinking into the plush cushions, but their posture remained stiff, guarded. Ethan could see the calculation in their eyes, the way they were sizing him up, deciding whether he was worth their trust. He couldn't blame them. Ethan sat across from them, hands clasped together. "I need to be honest with you. I had no idea you existed. Your mother never told me." Liam's jaw clenched, his fingers gripping the hem of his jacket. "We figured." "Why do you think she didn't?" Ethan pressed, watching their reactions carefully. Noah's gaze flickered with something unreadable. "Maybe because you left." Ethan inhaled sharply. He had expected the question, but hearing it still sent a sharp pang through him. "Rachel and things were complicated back then. I was building my company, and He stopped himself, realizing how weak the excuse sounded. "I didn't think I could have both, her and my career." Liam let out a quiet scoff. "Guess you made your choice." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but the weight of the truth made it impossible. Yes, he had made his choice, and in doing so he had lost more than he ever realized. Instead of arguing, he shifted the focus. "Tell me about your mother. How is she?" Noah's expression darkened. "She's sick. Pneumonia. She's in the hospital, and the bills are piling up." Ethan straightened. "Which hospital?" "Boston General," Liam answered. "She's been working non-stop for years to take care of us. She never asked for anything. And now—" He trailed off, his voice tight. Ethan's gut twisted. Rachel had always been strong, independent. But the thought of her struggling, of her in a hospital bed while he had been living in luxury, it was like a slap to the face. "I'm getting her transferred here," Ethan said suddenly, his voice firm. The boys looked at him, startled. "What?" Noah asked. "I have connections at Cedars-Sinai," Ethan said, already reaching for his phone. "It's one of the best hospitals in the country. I'll arrange for a private medical flight. She'll get the best care possible." Liam stared at him, a mix of surprise and suspicion in his eyes. "You think you can just fix everything with money?" Ethan set his phone down, meeting Liam's gaze directly. "Number I don't. But I can do this. I can make sure she gets the best treatment. I wasn't there before, but I'm here now." Noah shifted uncomfortably. "Mom's not going to like this." Ethan nodded. "Probably not, but she needs help, and I'm not going to sit back and do nothing." The room was quiet for a long moment before Liam finally spoke. "We should call her," Ethan pushed his phone toward them. Go ahead. Noah hesitated before picking it up and dialing the number. The line rang twice before a weak but familiar voice answered. Hello? Mom, Noah said quickly. It's us. Rachel's sigh of relief was audible through the speaker. Oh, thank God. Are you okay? Where are you? Liam glanced at Ethan before answering. We're in Malibu. Silence. Then Rachel's voice, sharp despite her exhaustion. You went to him. Ethan leaned forward. Rachel. Another pause. Then softly. Ethan. The way she said his name. It hit him harder than he expected. Noah spoke before she could continue. Mom, he wants to help. He's going to transfer you to Cedars-Sinai. No, Rachel said immediately. You shouldn't have gone to him. Ethan's grip on the table tightened. Rachel, you're sick. This isn't about pride. I know what it's about, she interrupted, her voice hoarse. But you don't just get to walk back into our lives after 12 years and act like you can fix everything. I'm not trying to fix everything, Ethan said evenly. I'm trying to help. Let me help you. Silence stretched on the line. Then, finally, Rachel let out a tired sigh. I'll think about it. That was the closest thing to a yes Ethan was going to get, and he knew it. Noah hesitated before speaking. Mom, what else haven't you told us? Rachel was quiet for a long moment. We'll talk about it when I see you. Then I'll make sure that happens, Ethan said firmly. Rachel didn't argue. Instead, she exhaled softly. Take care of them, Ethan. Ethan glanced at the boys. I will. After a few more quiet words, the call ended. Ethan sat back, running a hand through his hair as he tried to process the conversation. She's going to fight you on this, Noah warned. Ethan let out a dry chuckle. That sounds like Rachel. Liam studied him for a long moment. We're not just going to forget that you weren't there. I don't expect you to, Ethan admitted, but I want the chance to make up for lost time, if you'll let me. The boys didn't answer right away, but they didn't say no either, and for now, that was enough. Ethan Caldwell had spent his career solving problems. There wasn't a challenge he couldn't overcome with logic, strategy, and sheer force of will. But as he sat in his living room, staring at the two boys who had just walked into his life, he realized this was a problem he had no immediate solution for. He had sons. The weight of that truth sat heavy in his chest. It was impossible to ignore the similarities, the sharp angles of their faces, the dark hair, the calculating way they observed him as though sizing him up. Liam and Noah Carter, his sons. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, his mind racing. I need to see the proof. Noah, who had been expecting this, nodded and reached into his backpack. We thought you might. He pulled out a worn folder and set it on the coffee table between them. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before flipping it open. Inside there were photographs. Rachel in college, standing in front of the MIT library, her arms crossed and her lips curled into the smallest of smirks. In some of them she wasn't alone. There was Ethan, younger and leaner, his arm draped casually around her shoulder. He stared at the images, memories flooding back. He had forgotten how happy they had been. Or maybe he had just forced himself to forget. Liam reached forward, sliding another piece of paper in front of him. Mom wrote about you in her old journals, he said, his voice cautious. She kept this. Ethan glanced down and immediately recognized Rachel's handwriting. The date at the top read January 2009, months after he had left for Silicon Valley. His chest tightened as he read. I told myself I wouldn't write about him. But I can't stop thinking about Ethan. I wonder if he ever thinks about me. About us. I wonder if he'll ever know what he left behind. Ethan exhaled slowly, pressing his fingers into his temple. He turned the page. scanning through entries that chronicled Rachel's struggles, her decision to keep the pregnancy a secret, her fears about raising the boys alone. It was all there, in black ink. She had been afraid to tell him, because she thought she would be a burden. A bitter taste settled in his mouth. Was that really what she thought of me? He had been ambitious, yes, driven, absolutely. But had he really given her the impression that she couldn't count on him? Noah cleared his throat, bringing Ethan back to the present. We also did this. He pulled out his laptop and opened a program, turning the screen so Ethan could see. Lines of code scrolled by, but the result was clear. A side-by-side facial recognition match. 99.4% probability. Ethan let out a slow breath. He didn't need an algorithm to tell him the truth. The proof was already sitting in front of him, staring back at him with his own damn eyes. I believe you, he said finally, his voice rougher than he intended. You don't need to convince me anymore. The tension in the room shifted slightly, but Liam remained stiff, his arms crossed. That's great and all, he said, but belief doesn't change the last 12 years. You weren't there. Ethan met his gaze, nodding slowly. You're right, I wasn't. The admission seemed to catch both boys off guard. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I can't change the past, but I can tell you the truth. Your mother and I, we were young. I thought I had to choose between my career and my personal life, and I chose wrong. I didn't know she was pregnant. If I had, I would have... He stopped himself. What would he have done? Would he have stayed? Would he have built his company differently, found a way to have both? Or would he have still left? He honestly didn't know. Noah, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke. So what happens now? Ethan looked between them. They weren't here for money. If they were, they would have gone straight to the press or demanded something from him. No, they were here for something much bigger. They wanted to know if he was worth knowing. I want to help your mother, Ethan said. I've already spoken to Cedars-Sinai. I can have her transferred here for better treatment. Liam's jaw tightened. She won't accept your charity. Ethan smirked faintly. She was always stubborn. Noah glanced at Liam before speaking. She doesn't like asking for help, but she needs it. The doctors say she's stable for now, but she's not getting better as fast as they'd like. Ethan inhaled deeply, pressing his palms together. Then I'm making the arrangements. Liam looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Ethan's expression stopped him. Instead, he shifted in his seat. And what about us? Ethan straightened. What do you want? The question seemed to catch them off guard. The boys exchanged glances, and for the first time they looked uncertain. We don't know, Noah admitted. We just wanted to know who you were. Ethan's throat tightened. And now that you do? Liam shrugged, still figuring that out. Ethan nodded, accepting the answer. Then let's take it one step at a time. You can stay here while we sort this out, and when your mother arrives, we'll figure out where we go from there. Liam looked like he wanted to argue, but Noah nudged him slightly, giving him a look. After a moment, Liam exhaled and nodded. Fine, one step at a time. Ethan stood. Come on, I'll show you around. The boys followed him as he led them through the house, pointing out rooms they could use, amenities they could access. They were quiet, observant. And though they didn't say it out loud, Ethan could see it in their eyes. They were trying to decide if he was worth giving a chance. He intended to prove that he was. Ethan Caldwell wasn't a man used to feeling powerless. He built his company from nothing, outmaneuvered competitors, and made billion-dollar decisions with unwavering confidence. But as he lay awake in his massive king-sized bed, staring at the dark ceiling, He felt a crushing weight unlike anything he had experienced before. He had sons, 2 of them, and they had lived 13 years without him. He exhaled sharply, turning onto his side. Sleep was impossible. His mind kept replaying the conversation with Liam and Noah, their guarded expressions, their obvious skepticism. He had expected hostility. Hell, he probably deserved worse. But seeing their reluctance, their hesitation to trust him, cut deeper than he thought possible. How did he make this right? His phone vibrated on the nightstand, the soft glow illuminating the otherwise dark room. He grabbed it, squinting at the screen. A message from his assistant, Jessica. Jessica, the medical transfer is set. Cedars-Sinai is ready for Ms. Carter's arrival. Flight scheduled for tomorrow morning. Ethan sighed in relief. One problem at least had a solution. Ethan, good. Make sure they have everything she needs. A beat later, another message arrived. Jessica, the board is asking if you'll be in SF this week. They're concerned about your absence. Ethan frowned. The board could wait. His focus wasn't on corporate deals right now. It was on the 2 kids sleeping under his roof and the woman he had abandoned all those years ago. Ethan, tell them I'm handling personal matters. They can manage without me for a few days. Jessica's response came quickly. Jessica, understood, but you know they won't be happy. Ethan let out a humorless chuckle. He didn't care. For once in his life, his business wasn't his priority. The next morning, Ethan found Liam and Noah in the kitchen. The massive, open-concept space looked foreign with them in it, like something out of a dream he hadn't realized he wanted. Liam was inspecting the state-of-the-art espresso machine, while Noah was rummaging through the fridge, unimpressed by its contents. When they noticed Ethan standing in the doorway, a brief moment of silence stretched between them before Noah broke it. You don't have real food, he noted, pulling out a bottle of imported mineral water. Just expensive things that look like food. Ethan smirked. I usually eat out or have something delivered. Liam shook his head. Figures. Ethan walked over to the counter, leaning against it. I arranged for your mom's transfer. She'll be in L.A. by this afternoon. Noah set the bottle down, his expression cautious. She agreed? She didn't say no, Ethan admitted, which is as close to a yes as I think I'll get from her right now. Liam's arms remained crossed. So what? You're just going to sweep in, throw your money around, and act like you care now? Ethan met his gaze evenly. I'm not throwing money around, Liam. I'm making sure she gets the best care possible. I don't expect that to make up for everything, but it's a start. Liam looked like he wanted to argue, but Noah nudged him slightly, giving him a look. After a long pause, Liam exhaled and grabbed a glass, filling it with tap water before taking a slow sip. He wasn't giving in, but he wasn't fighting either. It was a start. Ethan turned back to Noah. And you? Do you think I'm just here to throw money at problems? Noah hesitated before shaking his head. I don't know what I think yet. Fair enough, Ethan thought. At least he was honest. Later that morning, Ethan received a call from Cedars-Sinai confirming Rachel's transport had gone smoothly. He was relieved, but he knew seeing her again in person would be another battle entirely. By noon, Ethan had his car ready to take the boys to the hospital. The drive was quiet, but tension hummed in the air. The boys were restless, shifting in their seats, their minds clearly racing with thoughts of their mother. When they arrived, the hospital smelled like antiseptic and quiet urgency. Ethan led them to the private wing where Rachel had been placed. When they reached the door to her room, Liam hesitated, looking up at Ethan. What if she's mad? Ethan softened slightly. She probably is. Noah nodded. We should still go in. Ethan pushed the door open, and there she was. Rachel Carter lay in a hospital bed looking pale but alert. Her brown eyes flicked to them immediately, first landing on her son's, then shifting to Ethan. He braced himself. "I should have known you wouldn't just leave it alone," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. Ethan took a slow breath. "You needed help. I wasn't going to stand by and do nothing." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. Instead, she reached out, and Noah was the first to step forward, gripping her hand. "Mom," he said softly. "I'm okay, sweetheart," she assured him, squeezing back. "And you two—" She shot a knowing look at Liam. "We're going to have words about this little trip of yours." Liam had the decency to look sheepish, though he didn't apologize. "You always told us to be resourceful." Rachel sighed. "Not like this." Ethan watched the exchange, his chest tight. Even in a hospital bed, Rachel radiated the same strength she always had, but there was something else now. Fatigue, worry. He had done this. He had left her to bear the weight alone. Rachel turned her gaze back to him. "So what's the plan, Ethan? You move us all into your fancy house and pretend like the last 12 years didn't happen?" Ethan met her eyes, unflinching. "The past happened, but I want to be part of the future." Rachel looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her gaze. Then she let out a tired breath. "We'll see." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either, and for now that was enough. The ride back from the hospital was quiet. Liam and Noah sat in the back seat of Ethan's luxury car, their thoughts miles away. Rachel had allowed herself to be moved to Cedars-Sinai, but she had been clear. This changed nothing. She wasn't ready to let Ethan waltz back into their lives as if the last 12 years hadn't happened. Ethan understood that, but understanding it didn't make it easier to accept. He glanced in the rearview mirror at the boys. They had their mother's resilience, that much was obvious. But there was something else, too. Something unmistakable. They were his sons. The realization hit him in a way nothing else had before. These weren't just two kids who happened to share his DNA. They were smart, determined, and stubborn as hell. They had tracked him down with nothing more than their instincts and technology, and they weren't going anywhere. Ethan cleared his throat. "You guys hungry?" Noah shrugged. "Depends. Are we getting real food or just things that look like food?" Ethan smirked. "How about burgers? There's a place near the house." Liam raised an eyebrow. "You eat burgers?" "Not often," Ethan admitted, "but I'm willing to make an exception." That got a small smile out of Noah, and a little of the tension in the car eased. The burger joint was a local spot just outside of Malibu. Nothing fancy. Just a place with greasy fries and milkshakes that had probably never been near actual dairy. Ethan hadn't set foot in a place like this in years, but watching Liam and Noah dig into their burgers made the experience oddly satisfying. Noah wiped his mouth and leaned back in his seat. "So, Mr. CEO, do you actually know how to code, or do you just pay people to do it for you?" Ethan arched an eyebrow. "You don't think I built Caldwell Innovations from the ground up without knowing how to code, do you?" Liam leaned in, intrigued. "So you used to code?" "I still do," Ethan admitted, "when I have time. It's not all board meetings and press conferences." Noah tilted his head. "What languages?" Ethan grinned. C++, Python, Java. I used to mess around with machine learning algorithms before it became the next big thing." Noah exchanged a glance with Liam before pulling out his phone. "We've been working on a project, something Mom helped us with." Ethan took the phone as Noah opened an app. A series of coded lines filled the screen, running real-time analysis of images, breaking them down into metadata, and creating visual matches. "This is facial recognition software," Ethan realized, impressed. "Did you build this from scratch?" Noah nodded. Liam worked on the UI, but the back end is mine. We were trying to see if we could improve the algorithm by adding behavioral markers, not just facial points. Ethan let out a low whistle. This is advanced work. Liam smirked. Well, we didn't get our brains from nowhere. Ethan chuckled. Clearly not. A warm sense of pride filled his chest. These kids weren't just bright, they were extraordinary, and Rachel had done it all on her own. You should come to the office with me sometime, Ethan said. I'd love to show you some of the projects we're working on. Liam hesitated, but Noah was already nodding. That would be cool. Liam shot his brother a look. We're not just going to start hanging out like nothing happened. Ethan met his gaze evenly. I don't expect you to, but I'd like to start somewhere. Liam didn't respond right away, but he didn't argue either. That was enough for now. Later that evening, the boys were in the living room, scrolling through their laptops, when Ethan walked in. He hesitated, then took a seat on the couch across from them. You guys want to watch something? Noah looked up. What, like a movie? Ethan nodded. Yeah, I figured we could just hang out for a bit. Liam gave him a skeptical look. Do you even have normal TV, or is it all business news and stock market updates? Ethan smirked. I do own a streaming service, you know. Noah grinned. Oh, so now we're just flexing? Ethan chuckled. A little. Liam sighed and leaned back. Fine, but no documentaries. Ethan held up his hands in surrender. Deal. They settled on an action movie, and for the first time since they arrived, the atmosphere in the house didn't feel so strained. The tension was still there, but it was softer now, less like a wall and more like a barrier that might eventually come down. Halfway through the movie, Noah stretched out and let out a yawn. This couch is actually pretty comfortable. Ethan smirked. Glad you approve. Liam, who had been quiet for a while, finally spoke. So, what happens when Mom gets better? Ethan knew this question was coming. He turned the volume down slightly and faced them. That's up to her, and to you. I don't want to force anything, but I also don't want to disappear again. Noah studied him. Do you regret it? Ethan didn't hesitate. Every day. Liam nodded as if that answer was enough, for now. As the movie continued, Ethan allowed himself a small moment of hope. He still had a long way to go, but at least he had a place to start. Ethan knew that his life was changing, but he hadn't realized how quickly the outside world would take notice. The morning after spending time with Liam and Noah, he woke up to a slew of missed calls and messages. His assistant, Jessica, had left at least 5 voicemails, and the urgency in her tone made him sit up straighter. He dialed her back immediately. Jessica, what's going on? Sir, we have a problem, Jessica said, her voice clipped. The media got wind of the boys. Someone leaked a photo of them at your beach house, and now the press is all over it. Ethan closed his eyes and exhaled. He should have expected this. He had spent years dodging personal scandals and keeping his private life separate from the public eye. But this wasn't just about him. Tell me exactly what's out there. Jessica sighed. A gossip site ran a piece this morning with the headline, Billionaire Ethan Caldwell's Secret Sons. It's mostly speculation, but they have side-by-side photos of you and the twins. And honestly, sir, the resemblance is undeniable. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, already feeling the headache forming. Do we know who leaked it? No, but I have my suspicions, Jessica said. Victor Langford has been stirring things up. He's been pushing to challenge your leadership at Caldwell Innovations, and if he thinks you're distracted, he'll use it against you. Ethan clenched his jaw. Victor Langford, one of the company's major shareholders, had been circling like a vulture for years, waiting for a moment of weakness, and now he had one. What's the board saying? They're concerned, obviously. They want a statement. Ethan exhaled. I'm not making a statement. Not yet. Jessica hesitated. Sir, the longer you stay silent, the more people will speculate. They'll assume the worst. Ethan rubbed his temple. I don't care what they assume. I care about my sons. Jessica softened slightly. Then you need to protect them. And Rachel. Ethan nodded to himself. I'll handle it. Get me a list of reporters covering the story. And keep an eye on Langford. I want to know what he's up to. Yes, sir. As he hung up, Ethan turned his gaze toward the guest rooms where the boys were still asleep. He had been trying to take this slowly, to earn their trust. But the world wasn't going to give them time. And if the media was already digging, Rachel wasn't going to be happy. By the time Ethan arrived at Cedars-Sinai, Rachel was already sitting up in bed, a newspaper open in her lap. The moment he stepped inside, she looked up, her expression unreadable. I assume you've seen this? She said, folding the paper and tossing it onto the bedside table. The headline glared back at him, Billionaire's Hidden Family. Who are the Carter twins? Ethan sighed. I just found out this morning. Rachel arched an eyebrow. And you didn't think to warn me? I didn't expect it to happen so fast, he admitted. But I should have, and I should have called. She studied him for a long moment before shaking her head. This is exactly why I never told you, Ethan. I didn't want our lives turned into a media circus. I know, he said, and I'll fix it. Rachel let out a bitter laugh. And how do you plan to do that? The whole world is talking about them now. You can't just throw money at this. I'm not going to throw money at it. His voice was firm. I'm going to control the narrative. I'll make sure they're safe. Rachel scoffed. Safe? They're kids, Ethan. They shouldn't have to deal with reporters stalking them or photographers trying to make a quick buck. Ethan exhaled sharply. I'm working on it, Rachel, but I can't change the fact that this happened. What I can do is make sure no one hurts them because of it. Rachel's expression softened slightly, but the worry in her eyes remained. They don't even know yet, do they? No, Ethan admitted. I wanted to tell you first. Rachel shook her head. You should have told them first, Ethan. They deserve to hear it from you, not from some stranger on the internet. Ethan felt the sting of her words, but she was right. He had been so focused on damage control that he hadn't thought about what mattered most, the boys themselves. I'll talk to them, he promised, before they see it online. Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. You should have stayed a mystery to them, Ethan. It would have been easier. He stepped closer. Would it? She looked up at him, her expression conflicted. I don't know anymore. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. All he knew was that he wasn't walking away this time. Back at the house, Ethan found Liam and Noah in the living room, both hunched over their phones. He didn't need to ask if they had seen it. The looks on their faces told him everything. Liam was the first to speak. So, we're famous now? Ethan sighed. I was going to tell you before you saw it online. Noah's expression was unreadable. Well, the internet beat you to it. Ethan took a seat across from them. Listen, I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that I will protect you. No one is going to harass you. Liam let out a dry laugh. Too late for that. Some kids from school already messaged us. One of them asked if we get private jets now. Ethan's jaw tightened. I can handle the press. I'll put out a statement, shut down any speculation. Noah glanced at him. And what will that statement say? That I have 2 sons. That this is a private matter. Liam scoffed. So what, you're claiming us now? Like we're some business acquisition? Ethan inhaled sharply. That's not what I meant. Yeah? Because that's what it sounds like, Liam snapped. You didn't want us before, but now that the world knows, suddenly we're important. That's not true. Ethan's voice was firm. I didn't know about you before, but I do now, and I'm not going anywhere. Liam's anger flickered with something else, something more vulnerable. Then prove it. Ethan met his gaze, unwavering. I will. Noah spoke up, quieter this time. What if we don't want to be part of your world, Ethan? What if we just want to be normal? Ethan hesitated. He had spent years thriving in chaos, but these boys, they hadn't asked for this life. If that's what you want, he said carefully, I'll do everything in my power to make sure you have as normal a life as possible. Liam studied him for a long moment before nodding. We'll see. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was something. And for now, Ethan would take it. The tension inside Ethan's Malibu home was palpable. Ever since the media storm broke, things had shifted. Liam and Noah, who had just begun to lower their walls, now seemed even more guarded. The house, which had started feeling less like a museum and more like a home, suddenly felt cold again. Ethan paced in his office, scrolling through news articles on his tablet. He had done damage control, issued a carefully worded statement, and ensured that Rachel and the boys were shielded from reporters. But the damage had already been done. The media had spun their own version of events, some painting him as a negligent father making a desperate attempt to reconnect, others accusing him of using his sons as a PR stunt. He tossed the tablet onto his desk with a sigh. None of that matters. What matters is them. A knock at his door made him turn. Noah stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Liam and I want to talk. Ethan straightened. Of course, let's go to the— No, Noah cut in. Here, just us. Ethan hesitated but nodded. Okay. Noah stepped inside and Liam followed a second later, his arms crossed. The boys took seats across from Ethan's desk, but their postures were rigid, defensive. Liam spoke first. We need to know what this really is. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Noah leaned forward. This. United States. You. Is this just guilt? Or are we some obligation to you now? Ethan inhaled slowly, considering his words. You're not an obligation, and this isn't about guilt. Liam scoffed. Then what is it? Because we don't know you. And suddenly we're living in your house, plastered all over the news and supposed to believe you actually care. Ethan clenched his jaw. I do care. Why? Liam challenged. Because we exist? That's not enough. Noah's voice was quieter but firm. We grew up without you, Ethan. Mom never badmouthed you, but she never talked about you either. And now, suddenly, you want to be in our lives? Ethan exhaled, leaning forward. You're right to question this. I won't pretend that I deserve your trust. But I know what it feels like to have nothing but your work, to convince yourself that success is enough. I've lived that life, and it's not enough. I don't want to just know of you. I want to know you. If you'll let me. Silence stretched between them. Liam tapped his fingers against the desk. You say that now. But what happens when the headlines die down? When we're not new and interesting anymore? Ethan met his gaze without hesitation. I'm not going anywhere. Liam scoffed. That's easy to say. Noah hesitated. You really expect us to believe that you suddenly want to be our dad? Ethan exhaled. I expect you to take your time figuring out whether you can believe it, and in the meantime I'll prove it to you. Liam studied him, his expression unreadable, before finally shaking his head. We'll see. The boys stood, and without another word they left the room. Ethan sat back, running a hand over his face. This was going to take more than just words. The following day, Ethan walked into the kitchen to find the boys sitting at the island, their laptops open, deep in discussion. What are you working on? Ethan asked, grabbing a glass of water. Noah glanced up. Our project, the one we showed you. Ethan leaned against the counter. The facial recognition software? Liam nodded. Yeah, we've been tweaking it. We think we can use behavioral markers instead of just facial structure for better accuracy. Ethan's interest piqued. That's impressive. Are you using machine learning to refine the results? Noah smirked. Now you're speaking our language. Ethan pulled out a stool and sat down. Show me. Liam hesitated before turning his laptop toward Ethan. This is the data set we're training. The problem is that current algorithms have too many false positives. We're trying to reduce that. Ethan studied the screen, then nodded. Have you considered training the model on sequential image patterns instead of static ones? It might improve accuracy. Noah's eyes widened. That actually makes sense. Liam glanced at Ethan, suspicion still in his gaze, but there was a flicker of something else. Respect, maybe. Ethan leaned back. I'd love to help, if you'd let me. Noah exchanged a look with Liam before shrugging. Yeah, okay. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. Later that night, Ethan sat in his office, staring at the folder Rachel had left in the hospital room. It contained medical records, school transcripts, and small notes she had written about the boys over the years, things she had kept track of despite never intending to tell him. One note caught his eye. Noah loves coding. He reminds me of Ethan. Liam is more skeptical, but he's protective. Like me. Ethan swallowed hard. Rachel had raised them well, and now he had to prove he was worthy of being part of their lives. He closed the folder and made a decision. Tomorrow, he wasn't just going to tell the boys he was in this for the long run. He was going to show them. Ethan had always been a man of action. When problems arose, he tackled them head-on, using strategy and precision to find solutions. But dealing with business challenges was easy compared to trying to rebuild trust with his sons. Over the past few days, the boys had let him in, just enough to make him believe progress was possible. Noah had shown him more of their coding project, and Liam had reluctantly engaged in deeper conversations. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was something. Then everything fell apart. It started with a phone call from Jessica. Jessica. Ethan, we have a situation. Victor Langford is calling for an emergency board meeting. Ethan stiffened. On what grounds? Jessica hesitated. He's questioning your leadership. The shareholders are worried that your personal distractions are affecting your focus. Ethan clenched his jaw. So he's trying to push me out. He's using the media storm around your sons as leverage, Jessica confirmed. He claims that your absence and the sudden attention on your personal life are making investors nervous. Ethan exhaled slowly. He had expected Langford to make a move eventually, but he hadn't anticipated it happening this soon. When's the meeting? Ethan asked. Tomorrow morning. You need to be in San Francisco. Ethan glanced down the hall where Liam and Noah were working on their project. He had promised them he wouldn't leave, that he was here to stay, but if he didn't fight for his company, everything he had built could crumble. That evening, Ethan called a meeting of his own, with the boys. Sitting in the living room, he faced them with measured calm. I have to go to San Francisco tomorrow. It's urgent. Liam's expression immediately darkened. You're leaving? Just for a day, Ethan assured them. This is important. Noah frowned. More important than us? Ethan sighed. Number. But if I don't go, the company I built, everything I've worked for, could be at risk. Liam scoffed. So, work wins again. Ethan felt frustration rising but kept his voice level. It's not about choosing between you and my work. It's about making sure I still have something to offer you. We never asked for your money, Liam shot back. I know that. Ethan leaned forward. But I need to protect what I've built. Not just for me, but for you. For your future. Noah crossed his arms. So we're just supposed to wait here and hope you come back? Ethan exhaled. You're angry. I get it. But I need you to trust me on this. Liam shook his head. That's the problem, Ethan. We don't trust you. The words hit harder than Ethan expected. His jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. Then I'll earn it. Liam stood up abruptly. Good luck with that. Noah hesitated before following his brother out of the room. The slam of a door echoed through the house, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The next morning, Ethan left for San Francisco, his mind split between the boardroom battle ahead and the fractured connection with his sons. The meeting was as brutal as expected. Victor Langford sat at the head of the table, his expression smug as he laid out his concerns. Ethan, let's be honest. You've been distracted. Your personal matters are now public scandal. Investors are nervous. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp. I built this company from nothing. My leadership hasn't wavered. Langford smirked. Hasn't it? You're not here. Your face is in the tabloids. You've lost control of the narrative. Ethan's voice remained calm, but his tone carried an edge. You think a few news articles define my ability to run this company? I think perception matters, Langford countered. And right now the perception is that you're not fully committed. A murmur went through the room. Ethan let the silence hang before he spoke. I'll tell you what matters. Results. In the last quarter alone, our stock value has risen. Our partnerships are stronger than ever. And despite the media noise, our investors haven't lost faith, except perhaps for those looking for an opportunity to seize power. Langford's smirk faltered. I may be dealing with personal matters, Ethan continued, but that doesn't change the fact that I am the best person to lead Caldwell Innovations, and I will continue to do so. Silence stretched across the boardroom. Then, one by one, the other members nodded. Langford had failed. Ethan had won. But as he left the building, a thought nagged at him. Had it been worth the cost? By the time he returned to Malibu, it was late. The house was quiet, but he noticed a light on in the living room. As he stepped inside, he found Noah sitting on the couch, staring at his laptop screen. Noah barely glanced up. You win your meeting? Yes, Ethan admitted, but that doesn't matter if I lose you and Liam. Noah sighed. Liam's pissed. He thinks this proves he was right about you. And what do you think? Ethan asked. Noah hesitated. I don't know yet. Ethan sat down beside him. I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere. Noah finally looked up, studying him carefully. Then prove it. Ethan nodded. I will. But he knew words weren't enough. It was time to show them exactly where his priorities lay. Ethan Caldwell had never lost a boardroom battle, but the one he was fighting now, the one for his sons, was proving to be the hardest. The morning after his return from San Francisco, the tension in the house was worse than before. Liam barely acknowledged him. Noah was more measured, but still distant. The weight of their disappointment was heavier than Ethan had anticipated, and for the first time in his life, he felt completely powerless. But he wasn't going to give up. Rachel's words from the hospital echoed in his mind. You can't just walk back into their lives and expect them to trust you. He had to show them he was serious, that he wasn't going to be another fleeting presence in their lives. And he knew exactly how to do it. That afternoon, Ethan walked into the guest room where Liam and Noah had set up their workstations. Both boys were absorbed in their screens, coding side by side, their focus intense. He cleared his throat. I want to propose something. Liam didn't look up. Not interested. Ethan ignored the hostility and continued. Your project, the facial recognition software. I want to invest in it. That got their attention. Both boys turned toward him, surprise flickering across their faces. "Invest?" Noah repeated. "Like actually fund it?" "Yes." Ethan pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. "I had my R&D team at Caldwell Innovations review your code. They think it has serious potential, but I don't want my company taking it over. I want you two to run it, with my mentorship." Liam frowned. "You want to mentor us?" Ethan met his gaze. "Yes, and not just as your investor. As your father." The room was silent. Ethan could see the hesitation in Liam's posture, the cautious curiosity in Noah's eyes. He didn't blame them for doubting him. Noah was the first to break the silence. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Ethan said. "Just a commitment, from all of us. I help you develop this software properly, and we work on this as a team. We take it step by step, the way we should have from the beginning." Liam leaned back, arms crossed. "You think throwing money at our project is going to fix everything?" Ethan shook his head. I think working with you, earning your trust, and proving that I'm here to stay is what's going to fix things." Liam studied him for a long moment, then scoffed. "You really don't give up, do you?" Ethan smiled slightly. "Not when something matters." Noah exchanged a glance with Liam before speaking. "We'll think about it." Ethan nodded. "That's all I'm asking." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either, and that was enough for now. Later that evening, Ethan received a call from Rachel. "How are they?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "Still mad at me," Ethan admitted. "But I think I got through to them, a little." Rachel sighed. "They've spent their whole lives knowing I'd always be there. They don't have that certainty with you yet." "I know," Ethan said, "but I'm not going anywhere." She was quiet for a moment. "You know, they want to believe you. They just don't want to get hurt." Ethan swallowed hard. "I don't want to hurt them." "Then keep showing up," Rachel said simply. "Eventually they'll believe it." As Ethan hung up, he realized something. For the first time, he wasn't fighting this battle alone. The next day, Ethan took a step he never thought he would take. He officially stepped back from Caldwell Innovations. The news hit the business world like a bombshell. Headlines ran wild. Ethan Caldwell takes leave from his own empire. But Ethan didn't care. He had spent his whole life chasing success. Now it was time to chase something more important. Liam and Noah were sitting in the living room when the news broke. Noah read the headline aloud, eyes wide. "Ethan Caldwell stepping down temporarily?" Liam frowned, glancing up at Ethan. "What is this?" Ethan met their gazes evenly. "It means I'm here, for real. No more leaving." Noah was speechless. Liam, however, narrowed his eyes. "Why would you do that?" "Because you asked me to prove it," Ethan said. "And this is how I prove it." Silence stretched between them. Then slowly, Noah smiled. Liam shook his head, but this time there was no anger. Just something that looked an awful lot like understanding. Ethan had made his choice. And for the first time, it was the right one. The news of Ethan stepping back from Caldwell Innovations sent shockwaves through the business world, but in his Malibu home, it caused something even more unexpected. Silence. Liam and Noah had barely spoken a word since they read the headlines. They weren't angry. They weren't sarcastic. They were just quiet. Ethan didn't know if that was a good or bad thing. For years, every major decision he made had been calculated, strategic, designed to benefit his company. But this was personal. This was him showing his sons, with actions instead of words, that he was choosing them over his empire. And yet, they hadn't reacted the way he thought they would. As he sat in the living room, pretending to read emails, he kept sneaking glances at them. Noah was scrolling through news articles, no doubt reading every analysis of Ethan's decision. Liam had his arms crossed, staring at the ocean through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Finally, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. "Are you going to say something?" Noah looked up first. "You really did it." "Yes." Liam turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "Why?" Ethan met his gaze. "Because I needed to show you that I meant what I said, that I'm not going anywhere." Liam studied him, as if searching for a crack in his resolve. "And what happens if Caldwell Innovations crashes without you? What if this whole thing backfires?" Ethan shrugged. "Then I rebuild it." Noah raised an eyebrow. "Just like that?" Ethan leaned forward. "The company matters to me, but you two, you matter more." Liam let out a slow breath. "That's a big risk." Ethan nodded. "The biggest one I've ever taken." A beat of silence passed before Noah smirked. "You're insane, you know that?" Ethan let out a short laugh. "I've been told." Liam shook his head, but this time, there was no hostility, no skepticism, just something softer, something closer to understanding. For the first time, Ethan felt like he was getting through. Later that afternoon, Ethan got a call from Rachel. He stepped onto the balcony to answer it, the ocean breeze cool against his skin. "I heard the news," Rachel said, skipping the pleasantries. Ethan smirked. "I figured you would." There was a pause. "Why did you do it?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Because they needed to know they came first." Rachel exhaled softly. "You know, for years, I convinced myself you never cared, that you were too caught up in your world to even think about us." "I was," Ethan admitted, "and I regret it every day." Rachel was silent for a moment before she spoke again, softer this time. "They want to believe you, Ethan, but it's going to take time." "I know," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." Another pause, then a quiet chuckle. "You really did it. You really stepped back from your own company." "I really did." Rachel sighed. "Well, now you've got a bigger job." Ethan smirked. "What's that?" "Being a dad." The words hit him harder than he expected. He had spent the last few weeks fighting for this, but hearing Rachel acknowledge it made it real in a way nothing else had. "I'm ready," he said. Rachel laughed softly. "We'll see." That evening, Ethan found the boys in the living room, their laptops open. He expected them to be working on their project, but instead they were looking at something else. A list of college applications. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Planning for the future?" Noah shrugged. "We were thinking about it. Mom always pushed us to aim high, but..." He hesitated. "We didn't think we'd have many options." Ethan frowned. "Why not?" Liam sighed. "Money, mostly. Mom's smart, but she wasn't exactly rolling in cash." Ethan's chest tightened. He had spent years living in luxury while Rachel had struggled to provide for their sons. The guilt was suffocating. "You don't have to worry about that anymore," Ethan said firmly. "I'll make sure you have every opportunity you want." Liam's jaw tightened. "We don't want handouts." Ethan nodded. "I'm not offering a handout. I'm offering support. There's a difference." Noah glanced at Liam, then back at Ethan. "You really mean that?" "Yes." Liam exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "This is a lot." "I know," Ethan admitted. "But you don't have to figure it all out right now. We'll take it one step at a time." Noah hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Liam was slower to respond, but eventually he sighed. "Yeah, one step at a time." Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He wasn't expecting an instant fix, but this was a start. And for now, that was enough. Ethan had faced high-stakes negotiations, corporate takeovers, and cutthroat competitors, but nothing felt as intense as sitting across from his sons at the breakfast table, waiting for them to speak. Liam stirred his cereal absent-mindedly, while Noah scrolled on his phone. Neither of them had brought up their conversation from the night before, the one where they had finally admitted that maybe, just maybe, they were willing to trust him. But the hesitation was still there, lingering in the air between them. Ethan took a sip of his coffee before clearing his throat. "I was thinking we could do something today." Liam raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Another billionaire bonding experience?" Noah smirked, but Ethan just chuckled. Just something normal, something you guys actually want to do." Noah put his phone down. "Like what? You tell me." Liam exchanged a glance with his brother before shrugging. "We used to go to this old arcade with Mom back in Boston." Ethan smiled. "Then let's find one here." Liam looked skeptical. "You? In an arcade?" Ethan smirked. "I wasn't always a billionaire, you know." Noah leaned back in his chair. "Fine, but we're not going easy on you." Ethan laughed. "I wouldn't expect you to." The arcade was a chaotic mix of flashing lights, outdated carpet, and the constant sound of electronic beeps and victory jingles. It smelled like pizza and nostalgia, and Ethan had to admit, he hadn't been in a place like this in years. Noah dragged him toward a shooting game, loading up the controls. "Let's see if you still have any hand-eye coordination, old man." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're not that much younger than me." Liam smirked. "Debatable." They started playing, and Ethan quickly realized he was terrible at it. Noah, on the other hand, was ruthless, taking down targets with alarming precision. Liam was more methodical, waiting for the right shots. Ethan, however, was getting absolutely destroyed. "Okay," he admitted, setting the controller down after yet another loss. "I might not be good at this." Noah grinned. "You think?" Liam chuckled, shaking his head. "At least you tried." It was a small moment, but for Ethan, it was everything. They weren't just tolerating him anymore, they were letting him in. After the arcade, they grabbed burgers and milkshakes at a local diner. The conversation flowed easier than before. They talked about coding, their favorite movies, even ridiculous childhood memories of their mom trying to fix things around the house, only to make them worse. Ethan listened, soaking it all in. These were the moments he had missed, the moments he wanted more of. When they returned home, the mood was lighter than it had been in weeks. Ethan felt hopeful. But as he stepped into his office, his phone buzzed with a call from Jessica. "Ethan," she said, her voice urgent. "You need to see this." She sent a link to a news article. Ethan clicked it, his stomach tightening as he read the headline, "Ethan Caldwell's Family Scandal, Exclusive Interview with Rachel Carter." His heart pounded. Rachel wouldn't have spoken to the media, would she? As he read through the article, it became clear that she hadn't. But someone had given them private details. They had quotes from sources close to the family, speculation about his intentions, and worst of all, a direct attack on Liam and Noah, questioning whether they were simply looking for a payout from their newly discovered father. Ethan clenched his fists. This was exactly what he had been trying to avoid. Without hesitation, he dialed Rachel. She picked up on the second ring. "I saw it," she said immediately. Ethan exhaled. "It wasn't you?" "Of course not," Rachel snapped. "You think I'd sell our kids out to the press?" Ethan closed his eyes. "I just had to hear it from you." Rachel sighed. "Ethan, I don't know who's feeding them information, but this is bad. The boys haven't seen it yet." "They will," Ethan said grimly. "And when they do, it's going to hurt them." There was a long silence before Rachel spoke again. "What are you going to do?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "End this, once and for all." Liam and Noah were in the living room when Ethan approached, his phone still in hand. He debated not showing them the article, but that wasn't fair. They deserved to know what was being said about them. He sat down across from them and slid his phone onto the table. "You need to see this." Noah picked it up first, his eyes scanning the screen. Liam leaned over his shoulder, and as they read, Ethan saw the shift in their expressions: anger, frustration, and worst of all, hurt. "They're calling us gold diggers?" Liam asked, his voice tight. Noah set the phone down, shaking his head. "This is insane." Ethan's voice was firm. "I'm going to fix this." Liam let out a bitter laugh. "How? Buy off the media?" "No," Ethan said. "I'm going to go public, on my terms." Both boys looked at him in surprise. "I've spent my life guarding my privacy," Ethan admitted. "But this isn't just about me anymore. If I stay silent, people will keep speculating, keep attacking you. I won't let that happen." Liam narrowed his eyes. "So what? You're going to do an interview? Play the family man?" Ethan met his gaze evenly. "I'm going to tell the truth." Noah exhaled slowly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Because this isn't just about clearing my name. It's about standing up for you. For all of us." Liam studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then do it." Ethan felt something shift in that moment. Something real. It wasn't full trust, not yet, but it was belief. And for the first time, Ethan knew exactly what he had to do. Ethan had never been one for public vulnerability, but today, that was exactly what he was about to do. His name had always been synonymous with power, control, and success. Every move he made was carefully calculated, every decision based on logic and foresight. But now he was stepping into a situation where no amount of strategy could guarantee the outcome. This was personal. The interview was set for that evening. A high-profile journalist, Amelia West, had been chosen, one of the few reporters Ethan trusted to handle the story with integrity. He had called in favors, ensured that no tabloids or gossip outlets would get a seat at the table. This was going to be done his way, or not at all. Liam and Noah sat across from him in the living room, still digesting the decision he had made. They had agreed that going public was necessary, but that didn't mean they were entirely comfortable with it. "So," Liam said, arms crossed, "what exactly are you going to say?" Ethan met his gaze. "The truth." Noah exhaled. "And the truth is?" Ethan leaned forward, his tone steady. "That I didn't know about you. That your mother raised you on her own, and she did an incredible job. That I made mistakes, and now I'm doing everything I can to make up for them." Liam arched an eyebrow. "You think people are going to buy that?" "I don't care if they buy it," Ethan said. "I care that you know I mean it." Noah nodded slowly. "Okay, then let's do this." The interview took place in a private studio, set up to feel more intimate rather than staged. Amelia West was known for her no-nonsense approach, professional, sharp, but fair. Ethan had made sure of that. As he sat across from her, the cameras rolling, he felt the weight of the moment settle in. This wasn't just about controlling the narrative anymore. This was about proving to the world and to his sons that he was serious about being in their lives. "Ethan," Amelia began, "the world knows you as a tech mogul, a businessman at the top of his industry. But today, we're here to talk about something much more personal." Ethan nodded. "Yes." She glanced at her notes before looking back at him. "The reports about your sons came as a shock to many. Can you clarify the truth behind the speculation?" Ethan took a slow breath. "I didn't know about them. If I had, I would have been there. Their mother, Rachel, made a choice to raise them without me, and while I don't blame her, I regret that I wasn't there from the beginning." Amelia studied him. "There are those who say this is just a PR move, that you're only acknowledging them now because the media forced your hand." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. I understand why people might think that, but the truth is, I stepped back from my company for them. I chose to be here, with them, not because of headlines, but because I want to be their father. And I'm willing to prove that every single day. Amelia nodded, clearly impressed by his directness. And how do Liam and Noah feel about this? Ethan hesitated, then gave a small smile. I think they're still deciding. Back at home, Liam and Noah watched the interview from the couch. Rachel was with them, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. He's not bad at this, Noah admitted, watching Ethan handle the tougher questions with confidence. Liam leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Yeah, but let's see what he does next. Rachel sighed, shaking her head. You boys are more like him than you realize. They both looked at her in surprise. What's that supposed to mean? Liam asked. She smirked. You don't trust easily. You question everything. You push people away when they try too hard. Noah frowned. That's not... Rachel cut him off with a knowing look. It's okay. It's who you are. And honestly, I think it's why Ethan isn't giving up. Liam glanced at the screen where Ethan was wrapping up the interview. So, you think he means it? Rachel let out a breath. I think he's trying. When Ethan returned home, he found the three of them sitting in the living room waiting. He knew this moment would come. He just wasn't sure if he was ready for it. So, he said, looking at the boys. Thoughts? Noah shrugged. Not bad. You didn't embarrass us, so that's a win. Liam was more guarded. You sounded good, but words are just words. Ethan nodded. I agree, which is why I want to take the next step. Noah raised an eyebrow. What next step? Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes, sliding them across the table. I want you both to have choices. I've set up educational trust funds in your names. You can use them however you want. College, startups, projects, no strings attached. Liam hesitated before picking up the envelope, flipping it between his fingers. And what if we say no? Then you say no, Ethan said simply. This isn't a transaction. It's just me making sure you have options. Noah glanced at Liam, then back at Ethan. And what if we say yes? Ethan smiled. Then I'll be here to support you every step of the way. Liam let out a slow breath before setting the envelope back down. We'll think about it. Ethan met his gaze and nodded. That's all I ask. That night, as Ethan sat on the balcony, staring out at the ocean, Rachel joined him. She held a glass of wine, her expression thoughtful. You surprised me today, she admitted. Ethan smirked. I tend to do that. She chuckled, then grew serious. They're still figuring you out, but I think they're starting to believe you. Ethan exhaled. I hope so. Rachel studied him. And what about you? Do you believe in yourself? Ethan turned to her, his expression raw. For the first time in a long time, I think I do. Rachel smiled softly. Then maybe there's hope for all of us. As the waves crashed below, Ethan felt something shift. He had spent his life building an empire, but this was what mattered. And for the first time, he knew he wasn't facing it alone. Ethan Caldwell had spent his life chasing success, but for the first time, he understood what true wealth was. It wasn't measured in billion-dollar deals or the stock market. It was here, in the laughter echoing through his home, in the hesitant but growing trust in his son's eyes, in the quiet, knowing smiles Rachel had begun to give him. It had been 2 weeks since his public interview, and slowly, things were changing. The media frenzy had died down, replaced by a different kind of attention, one that was no longer fueled by scandal, but by curiosity. Could a billionaire really walk away from his empire for his family? Ethan didn't care what the world thought. He only cared about what Liam, Noah, and Rachel thought. And tonight, he was going to prove it one last time. The sun was setting as he walked onto the beach behind his Malibu home. A fire pit was lit, its flames flickering against the deepening twilight. Liam and Noah sat nearby, watching the waves roll in. Rachel stood a few feet away, arms crossed, a faint smile playing on her lips as she took in the scene. "All right," Ethan said, stepping toward the fire. "I think it's time we make this official." Noah raised an eyebrow. "Make what official?" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 envelopes. He handed one to each of them. Rachel unfolded hers first. Inside was a deed. "To the Boston house," Ethan explained. "I bought it. No strings attached. It's yours if you want it." Rachel stared at him, stunned. "Ethan, you spent years making a life for them there," he said softly. "I want you to have the choice. Stay here in California, go back to Boston. Whatever you decide, it's on your terms." Rachel swallowed hard, looking at him with something he hadn't seen in a long time, something close to admiration. Liam opened his envelope next. Inside was a business license with his and Noah's names on it. He blinked. "Wait, what is this?" Ethan smiled. "Your startup. If you want to take your project further, I'll back it. But only if you run it. This is your chance to build something for yourselves." Noah's eyes widened as he read through the paperwork. "You're serious?" Ethan nodded. "Completely." Liam stared at the documents for a long moment, then looked up. "And if we fail?" Ethan smirked. "Then you try again." Silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Noah grinned. "This is insane, but kind of amazing." Liam exhaled, nodding. "Yeah, it is." Ethan felt the tightness in his chest loosen. He wasn't just throwing money at them. He was giving them control over their futures, the one thing he had once taken from Rachel. Speaking of Rachel, she was still staring at him, the deed clutched in her hands. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked quietly. Ethan stepped closer. "Because I should have done it a long time ago." She searched his face. "And what about you? What do you want?" Ethan took a slow breath. "I want to be in your lives, whatever that looks like." Rachel hesitated. "And your company?" "I'll go back," Ethan admitted. "Eventually, but on my terms, and not at the cost of everything else." Rachel shook her head, a slow smile forming. "Who are you? And what have you done with the Ethan Caldwell I used to know?" Ethan chuckled. Turns out he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. Rachel laughed softly, then looked back at the ocean. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she sighed. "I don't know what's next, Ethan." He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Then let's figure it out, together." She looked down at their joined hands, then back at him, and this time she didn't let go. As the fire crackled and the waves rolled in, Ethan sat with his family, his real legacy. For the first time, he wasn't chasing something just out of reach. He had already found it.